This is Joe Pantozzi coming to you with my teammate, Chrissy Stevens. And we're going to talk about one item that just hit the newswire to me recently, and that's talking about the 40 million young people in America who have some kind of college tuition loan that is under the control or authority of the government. And so, Chrissy, I don't know if you know anybody who's got these kinds of loans and what kind of experiences they've had recently.
Not recently,
Yeah.
no, but I am intimately acquainted
Yeah.
with the government and their student loans.
There you go. So during the beginning of COVID, it's my understanding in 2020, the government came out in its generosity and said, we're going to suspend payments on your student loans. And maybe at a different point during the process, they also said, we're going to defer interest. So even though you're not going to be making payments, your bill is not going to be increasing. So we're going to suspend interest and we're going to suspend your payments. So it's not going to get worse when you do resume payments. So now they've just come out, a portion of that process is being contested before the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court has not yet weighed in on whether it's going to agree with President Biden's request that he wipe out between $10,000 and $20,000 of each person's loan. That's yet to be determined. In any case, the interest is going to be reinstituted in around September, and the first payments are going to be required to be restarted in October of 2023. And so the first thing I was thinking about was how people are going to receive this news, how they're going to respond and react to the news that here's another monkey wrench that's being thrown into our finances. I understand it was already part of your obligation. You made a commitment and a covenant to honor your debts. But the truth of the matter is, this has not been on my radar for 3 years. If I'm a person who took money from some kind of a student loan. So I've been in the habit of not having to make a student loan payment for 3 years.
Right.
So now I'm going to have to reincorporate that into my already tight budget. Why is it tight? Well, because of 1,000 things. You know, the job market's different, and I lost my job. We had another baby in the meantime. We moved into a bigger house, or we had some issues come up. Okay, it almost doesn't make a difference. I shouldn't say it this way. It shouldn't make a difference to your finances when this debt, when this obligation comes back into your radar screen, and now you're obligated to make the payment. And the most important piece that I want to encourage everyone to observe is that job one is making sure that top line belongs to you. However you want to describe it. I describe it as paying myself first.
Mm-hmm.
I describe it as making sure that the first 10% goes into an account for me, right? And that might be more in your case. It might be less in your case, but I have got into an agreement with my wife from the time we met, 1988, and we said, and we're Christians. We give the first 10% to the Lord. So I'm not talking about that. That's done. That's done before we even start talking about our finances. I'm talking about that top line after that. Okay, so we treat ourselves as our own family banking system. So I am my own number one best customer. I'm my own number one top creditor. I pay myself. I pay our family banking system, or our family bank, if you want to call it that, before we pay anybody else. And we had an agreement when we first got together and got married, and we said, or I should say it this way, I said, I don't care if our power gets turned off. I don't care if the light bill doesn't get paid. I don't care if we're late in the mortgage. We're not going to skip that first line. We're going to pay ourselves first. We're going to be our own most important number one banker. Now, by the way, I've never had the power turned off. I've never been late in my mortgage in the 35 years we've been married. That's not the point. The point was all those things were secondary.
Right.
Now, if you want to make a change in your life and you might want to make an important change and a change that will impact even your future and your kids' future, practice this in your own life and practice this so that your kids are watching. And that is, we get paid first. I don't care if we have a Visa bill that has a balance on it that we need to make a payment on. I don't care if we have a private tuition payment we have to make for our kids. I don't care if we have to put money away for Christmas or for summer vacation or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. You got to get paid first, and that money's going to a long-term wealth plan. It's not money. That's what we call put and take. I'm not going to put it in this month and take it out for an emergency next month, because I can pick out 12 emergencies that have happened over the last 12 months. It's not one of those accounts. This is a long-term account, a long-term capital account that's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger every single year. We'll talk about how to allocate it, how to deploy it in an individual situation. That's not for today's discussion. The point is, it doesn't matter what the world throws at you, whether it's expected or unexpected. You need to get paid first.
Okay. So after these 40 million people are staring down the barrel of this reinstituted debt that's now generating interest, and they pay themselves first, and now they're trying to figure out where this money is going to come from, because the goldfish syndrome, you grow into the bowl that you have. So we've grown into our budgets, and now we have to find $350 a month to pay Sally Mae, or whoever the government is calling themselves. Where should they find the money? What gets cut instead? What gets shifted?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But this is what I do know. There are two kinds of people in the world, financially speaking. Those that pay themselves first and pay everybody else afterwards. And the other kind of person is the kind that spends all the money and pays all their debts and makes all their expenses and spends on lifestyle, and then they save what's left over. And typically what happens is there's nothing left over.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have said this before in previous recordings, but this is a truth. It's always going to be a truth. The people that pay themselves last are always going to work for the people that pay themselves first. Always. So how do we start thinking about this? This is the first rule that I've always communicated to people. If you showed up at work on Monday morning and you're working for someone, you're not the owner, you're a W-2 employee working for somebody, and your boss says to you, hey, things are a little bit slow. The company's not in trouble necessarily, but we've got to tighten our belts, tighten our budgets. And there's 300 employees in this company. In order for us to not have to fire people, everyone has to take a 10% pay cut. So you're there, you just got your first cup of coffee, and the first thing you hear on 8 o'clock Monday morning is, I just got hit with a 10% pay cut. Is my world going to come crashing down? Is my financial world, is my family at home going to start crashing down? No, not really. You know what? I'm going to figure it out. I mean, I might just be able to tighten my own belt and figure out how we're going to make things work. I might decide to get a second job or a third job. I might send my wife to work. I might send my 12-year-old to work. I don't know. We're going to figure it out how to make that happen. Or I might take a little bit more cynical approach and say, I'm going to start looking for another job tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to continue doing the job I have, but I'm going to look out. I'm going to start putting my resume out and seeing where I can get a job that's not only going to make up that 10% deficit, but maybe look at increasing it and getting more money than I was making before the pay cut. Okay, do what you got to do is the bottom line, right? But the first thing that the person is going to say is, well, I'm not going to ruin the job I do have. Okay. I'm going to start working for 90% of what I was making before. Fine. I'll make that work until it doesn't work anymore. And when it doesn't work anymore, I'll figure out a way to make more money. Okay. That 10% pay cut is you imposing a 10% pay cut on yourself and saying, you know what? Doesn't make any difference. What we make, I don't care if we make 5,000 a month or 50,000 a month. The first 10% comes off the top, belongs to me and my family. And I'm going to be dogmatic about it. I'm going to be militaristic about it. I'm going to be non-compromising about it. That money belongs to me. If at the end of a year, and again, no matter how much money I made, if at the end of a year, I can't look back and say, I got to keep 10%, what am I working for? Okay, so use that as a backdrop and say, you know what? This should have been in place. If it wasn't in place before, it needs to be in place now. Because when that new college bill comes back into the mix, I'm already prepared because I was already paying myself first.
Okay.
This was all principle based. This is all philosophical. I mean, it's going to come down to the wire where you're going to say, okay, how do I do this practically? You bring in your closest ally, you bring in your financial planner, you bring in your spouse, you sit down with your board of directors, and you say, how do we make this work? There are ways to make it work. Give you 10 different suggestions. Let's get to that point. The first thing you have to do is decide, I am worth 10% at the end of the year.